everyone. Welcome. Welcome, Shelly, Alan. I don't know who else is there. If you are tuning in to this Torah L'chaim class, please use the chat. I would love to know who is studying with us today as we prepare for the festival of Sukkot. You can see I'm already kind of in the sukkah. This, what you see in the background, is the sukkah at Shari Zedek. It's a photo that Rina Elbaz took, and I liked it, so I decided to use it as a background. It's good to feel like I'm in the sukkah. Actually, you can tell that I'm not in the sukkah because I'm wearing short sleeves. I wouldn't be like that if this were a real sukkah, right? Even though I already have my sukkah in the backyard, even though the roof, the schach, flew away yesterday with the wind, and I've been procrastinating to put it back. But I guess I will do it this afternoon with the temperatures a little nicer, not so much wind, so I may end up doing it after this class. We'll see. We'll see, but yeah. Yeah, it was a little chilly today. It is, but that's what happened. It's fall, but that's fine. If it's like today, 5-6 degrees, but with sun shining is perfect for Sukkot. That's what is expected. Not the kind of crazy rain and wind that we had yesterday that was making me crazy. Worked so hard to put the sukkah together, and then now the roof is in the floor, and I have to find a way to reattach it. Anyway. So we've been studying about the high holidays, remember? We study about Rosh Hashanah, we study about Yom Kippur, we study about Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, and Simchat Torah. Hi Priscilla, Chag Sameach. We are going to start Sukkot just in a couple of days. That's so excited to have this all these holidays to wrap up the high holiday season. But as I was saying, we studied Sukkot already. So today I wanted to study something that I've been saying during the classes. And it is important for us to study, to be sure that whatever I mention stuff to you, you're aware. And that's specifically all the details related to the Jewish calendar and a little bit about the source of the mitzvot, the source of the commandment. Hi, Sarah Blumberg. Welcome. You're in an Uber listening to Christian music, which I can't understand. Okay. I won't read the word you use there, but yeah, I hear you. Maybe you should put this class loud in your phone. That would be fun. Yeah. Okay. Priscilla, you're in between patients. Interesting. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you today about the different aspects of the Jewish calendar. This is very important because sometimes we use concepts like the kind of Jewish days and months and the year is kind of confusing. So I said maybe we can make a pause in the order so we can study that. So we can catch up in certain things that is important for us to know. And remember, if this is the first time that you are catching one of our streams, remember to subscribe to our channels. And also, if you subscribe, remember to hit the bell so you will receive notifications every time that we upload any content to the internet or whenever we go live. Okay, said that, let's start studying. I don't know how long the class will be today. It might be a short class, but we'll see. We'll see. Let's go here. So first we have to understand how the Jewish calendar gets together with Jewish law. It's very important for us to understand concepts like Jewish hour, Jewish day, Jewish month, and Jewish year. Why is that? Because there will be many halachic components of our Jewish life that will fit into one of these categories that you can see here. But even though we use these names in English like day, week, year, life, sometimes when we are talking about those concepts from a Jewish point of view, we may be talking about something different, and it's very confusing. Because you know that, for example, the year, we are not in the same year in the Jewish side that in the civil side. So we are in the year 2020, but in Judaism, we are in the year 5781 that we just started on Rosh Hashanah. For example, let's take the week. The week is composed also by seven days, but the names of the week in Jewish life are different than the names that we use in English, because they come from different sources. But even more important is about the day, even though it's about the hours of the day. We're going to study that. It's very, very, very confusing. Sometimes I used to joke, they said that's why we have what we call the Jewish time, when people come late. I say, oh, sorry, it was Jewish time. Because technically, and we are going to study this, according to Halakha, the concept of an hour is not fixed. Sometimes an hour could be short, sometimes an hour could be long. So who knows? Maybe the concept of Jewish time being so flexible, it might even have a halachic beginning. That tradition of being late and blaming it in Jewish time. We'll see. Okay, so basically, whatever we're going to study today could be fit into one of those circles that you see there. So let's move on and let's study a little bit about the day in Judaism. Okay, during the day, we have many things that we're supposed to do. We have the tefillot, the prayers, and berachot, blessings. We have daily mitzvot, commandments like tzedakah, right? Monetary help to the needy. And remember, tzedakah comes from the root tzedek. That means justice. So it's not charity. Maybe one class we should study just that, just about tzedakah and why tzedakah is not charity. In a nutshell, charity is voluntary. If you want, you give. If you don't want, you don't give. But tzedakah, it's not. Tzedakah is a mitzvah. It's a commandment. It's mandatory to give. That's why we don't call it charity. And then we have kashrut, dietary laws. This is something that we have to do every day, not only once a year. Some people, observe some kind of dietary law, for example, for Pesach, right? But the rest of the year is like nothing exists. No, this is something that we have to do every day of our lives. And also Talmud Torah, study of the Torah and Jewish topics. This is also a commandment that was given to be performed every single day. So you see, sometimes we have to understand what happens within the Jewish day, because we have lots of things that we have to do. And some of those things, they have specific times that they have to be done. And in order to understand the time, you have to understand time from a Jewish point of view. So, for example, we're going to see that during the day, we have three different services. We have the morning service, which is the shacharit, the afternoon service, which is mincha, and the evening service, which is mariv. But each one of the three has to be performed within certain times of the day, but that time is variable. It's not the same in the middle of the winter that in the middle of the summer. So if I tell you, for example, that something has to be said up to 2 hours from sunrise, well, it depends if it's in the middle of the winter or in the middle of the summer, because each hour, the length of each hour will be different. So have that in mind whenever you read in Jewish sources that something had to be performed a specific hour of the day or up to that specific hour of the day. Chances are that the text is talking about the Jewish hour, which we call it Sha'ah Zemanit, and it's variable. Also, we have things that we do either once a week or once a month. Once a week is, of course, Shabbat. The seventh day is the day of rest. We learned that from the Torah. And also we have the Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month, and there are specific things that we have to do for the beginning of the month. For example, we add the Chatzi Hallel during the service, which is the Hallel are a collection of praises to God. We give extra praises during the morning service whenever we have to say Hallel. And there are two versions of Hallel. We have the full Hallel, that we say for major festivals, and also we have the Chatzi Hallel, which is the partial. I don't want to call it half. I know Chatzi Hallel, the literal translation is half Hallel. It's more like partial Hallel because it's not exactly the half of it. Actually, it's all Hallel minus 2 chapters of the book of Psalms. So let's call it partial Hallel that we see on Rosh Chodesh. The other specific thing that we do on Rosh Chodesh, we have a special Torah reading for that day. Okay, so far we have things specific for the day, things specific for the week, and things specific for the month. So you know already that you have to understand the concept of day, the concept of hour, the concept of week, and the concept of month, because it's not the same a Jewish month than a secular month. We're going to see why. And then, of course, we have to understand the concept of Jewish year, right? In order to observe properly the festivals mentioned in the Torah. So what we call biblical holidays or festivals. We have Pesach, the Passover. We have Shavuot, the festival of weeks. Sukkot, festival of booths. Shmini Atzeret, the 8th day of assembly. And as we studied last class, some people confuse Shmini Atzeret and they believe that is the last day of Sukkot. They believe that it's part of Sukkot, but it's not. There are 2 back-to-back holidays. After the week of Sukkot, we have an extra day, which is called Shmini Atzeret, and it's an independent festival. Okay, important, very important for you to remember that. And then, of course, I didn't mention it here, but Shmini Atzeret also has integrated Simchat Torah in the diaspora, which means outside Israel. One day is Shmini Atzeret, and the day after is Simchat Torah. If you're in Israel, Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are actually the same day. The 2 components are the same day, which is weird, because that means that you have Iskor and the dancing with the Torah within the same service. Sounds crazy to us, but that's the way it works in Israel. They got used to it. So then, of course, we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and I put again Rosh Chodesh here because it's something that you will have it many times during the year. But then we also have what is called the Talmudic holidays. We don't have just the biblical holidays, but we have holidays that they were added by the rabbis. That includes Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer. Remember, 2nd day of Pesach, we start counting a period of 50 days. It's a cycle that separates Pesach from Shavuot. Every single day we say a blessing and we count the day. That cycle is called the counting of the Omer. And that was added by the rabbis. The only thing that the Torah says is that we have to bring an offering at the beginning of the cycle, and then we have to bring another offering, which is Shavuot, at the end of the cycle. But all the things that was added in the middle for Lag BaOmer, for the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, is not in the Torah. It was added by the rabbis for some historical episodes. So it's important to know that many things we do today, it's not because the Torah said so, but because the rabbis said so. Simchat Torah, here, remember I told you the 2nd day of Shmini Atzeret, because the Jews were, they decided to celebrate an extra day of festival for every biblical festival. So the 2nd day of the festival is rabbinic. It's not from the Torah. So Simchat Torah was added by the rabbis. Hanukkah, of course, it's not in the Torah, Hanukkah. It's not a biblical holidays. Then we have Tu B'Shvat, for example, the 15th day of the month of Shvat. Purim, which is this, it translates as lottery, but we all know the story of Purim, the story of Esther. And then we have, for example, Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, that we commemorate the destruction of the temple. So it's not in the Torah. It was established by the rabbis. Extremely important. And then we have modern holidays that they're not coming from the Talmud because they were created after the Talmud was already completed and closed. And some of them are Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust and Heroism Remembrance Day, Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day, and Yom Yerushalayim, the Jerusalem Day. So, I want to talk a little bit and expand a little bit this concept of the different sources for the mitzvot. And this is very important because sometimes we believe that Jews have 613 commandments. Ask more Jews. How many commandments do you have? Even little kids, they will know. We have 613 mitzvot. Wrong. We don't. We don't have 613 mitzvot. What we have is 613 commandments in the Torah. But then the rabbis added many others. So we probably have over thousands of mitzvot. The thing is, some are from the Torah, some are from the rabbis, and even the ones that they are from the Torah, they have things that they were added by the rabbis, or the way we observe those commandments were created by the rabbis. It's not clear from the Torah, so the rabbis put their input into how we understand those 613 commandments from the Torah. Okay, extremely important to understand that. So let's move on into the different sources for the commandments, for the mitzvot. So as we can see, we have three different sources of mitzvot. Number one, mitzvot deoraita. That's an Aramaic for from the Torah. Deoraita. Okay, from the Torah. This 630 mitzvot can be subdivided into 248 positive mitzvot. When I say positive, basically what it means is are all the commandments that say you shall do something. Whenever something is you shall, that is positive. And 365 negative mitzvot, those are all the mitzvot that it says you shall not do something. Oh, you cannot see what is in the bottom. Let me change this a little bit so you can see everything. Here you go. Okay, second source of commandments is mitzvot de Rabbanan. It almost sounds like that. It's also Aramaic for from the rabbis. And these mitzvot are commonly divided into two categories, Gezeira and Takana. Gezeira means fence. And are those commandments that the rabbis added to the commandments deoraita, the one from the Torah, to make them extra stringent, to be sure that those original commandments won't be broken by mistake. Let me give you an example. Because the Torah said, you shall not boil the kid in its mother's milk. Right? We all know that. And from there, we have the prohibition of mixing, when we eat or when we cook, meat with milk. But you can already see how that original commandment was exaggerated to forbidden any kind of meat with any kind of milk. So that itself is a fence that it was put around that original mitzvah from the Torah to be sure that the commandment will never be broken. But the rabbis sometimes add a double or triple or quadruple layer of stringencies to be absolutely sure that the commandment won't be broken. So the rabbis established that it's not just that you are not going to mix meat from a mammal with milk. Birds were included into the prohibition. I said, that's nonsense. I mean, birds and milk, they come from two different sources. So why prohibit to have, for example, chicken parmesan, which is forbidden according to Jewish law? Well, sorry to say, it's the Gezeira. It falls into that category. It's an extra fence that the rabbi put there just to be 100% sure that you will never break the commandments of not cooking the kid into its mother milk. It's another concept of eruv. Depends on the eruv. If you're talking about the eruv for Shabbat, it's a different thing. The eruv is it's a way. It's all the opposite. Actually, the eruv is a leniency. It's something to make it easier to observe a commandment from the Torah that it was a little bit difficult to fulfill. Right? If you don't create the eruv, it's very difficult to have a Jewish life in a Jewish neighborhood on Shabbat because you can't carry anything to synagogue. So they created this extension of your home. That's what the eruv is. It's an extension of your home so you can move around. Or within the limits of the eruv, you can carry things. Remember, on Shabbat, we are not allowed to carry. Tiltul. That's a no-no. So that's why the rabbis created the eruv. Okay, so Gezeira, right? That's the fence. But we also have the takana. Takana means, comes from the word tikkun, that means correction. And there are certain commandments that they were added for the welfare of the Jewish people. And let me give you an example. But to me, the most famous takana that we know in these days, it was the restriction of for marriage. What I'm saying for that, according to the Torah, a man can marry many women, multiple women. We have many examples in the Torah. The patriarchs, they have many wives, and that's okay according to the Torah. And also the Torah says that if you don't like your wife anymore, you just write her a get and you send her away from your house. It's as simple as that. She doesn't have to give you the consent. So about 1,000 years ago, we have a takana that it was written by Rabbi Gershom, that he said from now on, there's going to be a new commandment for the Jewish people that a man cannot marry more than one woman at a time. I mean, basically, if you become a widow, yes, you can marry somebody else, but not 2 wives or 3 wives or 4 wives simultaneously. And also, you're not allowed to divorce your wife without her consent. This is interesting because basically once polygamy was forbidden, then the fear was, well, I cannot marry many women, but then so what I do, I marry one, I don't like her, I just send her out of the house and then I marry another one. I don't like the new one, I write her a get, I send her out of the house and I marry another one. So to prevent that, the rabbis, very smart, they saw that coming. So they created a takana that included 2 restrictions. Number 1, no more polygamy. No, so fast. Number 2, you cannot divorce your wife without her consent. Now, it seems to be something that is against what the Torah said, but that's what a takana is. And this came to be because Jews started to live in countries where polygamy was already forbidden. And even though we know that we have a rule that is called Dina b'malchut Dina, the law of your land is your law. Even though we believe in that, they wanted to make it extra clear that from now on, we Jews are not polygamists. Now, the catch with that is that takana was created for the Ashkenazic world. The Sephardic never really accepted it. The only reason why they don't marry many women is because they live in countries where polygamy is forbidden. But from the Jewish point of view, from the halachic point of view, Sephardic Jews are not obligated to fulfill that takana because it was not created for them. Even for Ashkenazi, the takana, when it was created, was supposedly to last for 1,000 years, and that expired. So technically, Ashkenazi Jews could marry many women, but we don't do it because we live in countries that is not allowed, and we follow the principle of Dina b'malchut Dina, the law of your land is your law. Okay, so far we have 2 sources, the Oraita and the Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan we have 2 categories, Gezeira and Takana. Let's see, Shelley, you said concept, milk, meat, another boundary. Yeah, that's an extra boundary. And then we have the Aguna. Yeah, the Aguna, there is no solution yet for the Aguna. I wish the rabbis will create another takana to avoid the problem with the Agunot, the women who cannot receive the get, for different reasons. There are different reasons why a woman cannot receive a get. But the problem is, in this day and age, there is no such thing of a rabbi who will be accepted by everybody. Back in the day, when Rabbeinu Gershom said it, there was such a figure that all the Ashkenazi Jews in the world accepted what this rabbi said. In these days, you have so many different subdivisions within Orthodox Judaism that forget about it. They will never happen. It will never happen. One rabbi may accept it, but then another 100 will say no. And most of the time, why? For political reasons, because they don't want to give the other rabbi so much power by saying that. Yeah, sad, but truth. Nothing we can do. And there is a third way that we can receive mitzvot, commandments. And it's minhag, the tradition. You know that one? Tradition, of course. And this is a mitzvah that arises from custom. And it was not created by recent decision making. All the other one from the rabbis, they created the mitzvot either because they wanted to make it extra stringent, either because it was good for society, so we add the takana. But there were other things that started to happen that they were not calculated, but yet they happened. And then they decided to keep it as a new mitzvah, and that is all what we call the minhag, the tradition, and we are bound to it. Now, the thing is, from a halachic point of view, there is no difference between the three categories. The Oraita, the Rabbanan, and Minhag, we're all obligated to do it. But from the halachic point of view, there are different approaches to each one of them. So, for example, when you have two ways of fulfilling a mitzvah, that is the Oraita, from the Torah, the law is you always follow the more stringent. When you have two opinions from mitzvah, that is the Rabbanan, from the rabbis, you are allowed to follow always the most lenient. And same thing with the minhag. Always the more lenient, and there are ways actually where minhag could be changed, but it's a little bit complicated in these days where nobody wants to make those kind of decisions anymore. Okay, so very important. Three ways: the Oraita, the Rabbanan, and Minhag. That's how we receive mitzvot, commandments. But it's important because I always mention in my classes these three sources, and I thought it was important for you to know the background for that. Let's continue with the things that happen once in a lifetime, going back to the circles that I presented to you at the beginning. We have things like birth, and that includes circumcision and baby naming, bar bat mitzvah, marriage and divorce, death and burial. And this is very important because also is related sometimes to the concept of year. Let's dive into the calendar. It's a little complicated, but hopefully we'll make it to the other side. So, the Jewish calendar is it's not a use, it's used. It's used mainly for Jewish religious observances. It determines the dates for Jewish holidays and the appropriate public readings of Torah portions and Yortzeit, anniversaries of a death, among many ceremonial uses. In Israel, it is the official calendar for civil purposes and provides a time frame for agriculture. The current year of the Jewish calendar is 5781. If you celebrated the high holidays in any shape or form, you are probably aware of this. That's what it is, the Jewish calendar. So, what is this 5781 number? According to the rabbis, the world that we know was created 5,781 years ago. That according to rabbinic tradition. And that's why we have that number. Okay, and it's very important that we use the Jewish calendar, for example, for Yortzeit. When we observe anniversaries of death, we go by the Hebrew calendar, not the secular calendar. Most people observe that. Now, the Jewish calendar, and this is when it starts getting complicated, is lunisolar. What does it mean? It's a fixed lunar year based on 12 lunar months of 29 So when a month has 29 days, it's called chaser, or defective, or 30 days, maleh, or full. So this pretty much like the secular calendar, right? We have a month with 30 days, month with 31 days, and then we have February with 28 or 29, right? So in the Jewish calendar, instead of having month with 30 or 31 days, we have 29 or 30 days. Why is that? Because remember that we'll see that the lunar year, the year based on the cycles of the moon, is shorter than the solar year. So every month is a little bit shorter with that. So, but the thing is, we have to remember that there is an intercalary lunar month added 7 times every 19 years. I know, that's what I said. This is a little bit complex, but you don't have to calculate that. Everything will be printed on the calendar. So basically, we add an extra month once every 2 to 3 years to synchronize the 12 lunar cycles with a slightly longer solar year. A solar year exceeds a lunar one by about 11 days. So the civil calendar, the civil year, is 11 days longer than the Jewish year. And then once in a while we have to add this extra month. That is always the month of Adar, the month of Purim, that we add. So some years we'll have Adar 1 and Adar 2. So there are some certain Jewish years that we have not 12 days but 13. Why do we need to do this? Because it is important to celebrate the festivals mentioned in the Torah at the right season. And if you want to follow the seasons, you have to follow the solar year. But according to the Torah, the beginning of the month is related to the new moon. So that's why we need to have a calendar based on the cycles on the moon to calculate the month. But then we have to synchronize it with the solar calendar to be sure that we observe the festival at the right time of this solar year. I hope you're following me with this. Okay? Shelly, you said, do we start with the first and the seventh day? I don't understand the question. If you can reframe, I'll be happy to answer. So, each Jewish lunar month starts with a new moon. I already mentioned that. Although originally the new lunar crescent had to be observed and certified by witnesses, because you have to think about thousands of years ago, they didn't have ways, astronomical ways, to calculate in advance when the beginning of the month was going to be. So there were people that they were working for the Sanhedrin, that they were trained into detecting the new moon, so that when they observe the new moon, they will have to report it to the rabbis, and the rabbis will proclaim the new month. And this is very important because there was no new month unless the rabbi said so. People wouldn't go and calculate it themselves. They were always waiting for the rabbi's announcement of the new month. Lots of responsibility on the rabbis. They will. So it's very interesting. Hashem started, it became day 1. It rested day 7. So day 1 or day 7. Day 1 or day 7, we start with day 1, always, which is the Sunday for us. We will study the month in a minute. Okay, so far, let's go back to this. Originally, it has to be done by witnesses. The moment of the new moon is now approximated arithmetically. So in other words, we use computers now to know when it's going to be the new moon. So we don't need the rabbis to announce it anymore. We're allowed to calculate it ourselves. And that's the way we can create calendars. So the calendar also was designed in a way that it has to prevent Yom Kippur for falling on Friday or Sunday. So basically, Yom Kippur cannot be before Shabbat. It's kind of obvious, right? Because you cannot prepare them for Shabbat. And also it cannot be on a Sunday. It cannot be right after Shabbat. The rabbis made a calendar in a way that this will never happen. And that's why I said sometimes some months are 29, sometimes they are 30 days. Everything is calculated in a way that this will never happen. Also, they have to be sure that Hoshana Rabbah, which is the 7th day of Sukkot, can never fall on a Saturday, on Shabbat. And so Rosh Hashanah never falls on Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday. That is amazing. And it's great because we don't have to make any of these calculations. The rabbis already made all these things, hundreds of years ago, and it still works pretty well. And that's the way the Jewish calendar was designed. Because otherwise, if we don't prevent that, then we'll have all kind of problems with which day some holidays will fall. Okay, so the present Jewish calendar was introduced by Rabbi Hillel in the year 358 of the Common Era. Okay, the one that, when I'm talking about this, he presented the fixed order of the 7 leap years in this 19th year cycle. He was the one who created these things that once in a while we add the month of Adar. Back in the day of Hillel, that the system wasn't perfect. And little by little, with the advancements on astronomy, the calendar was perfected. And I don't know exactly when they reached the point where the rabbi said, oh, now we can actually 100% rely on science to create a calendar. But the concept was first introduced by Rabbi Hillel the year 358 on the Common Era. Yeah, well, but it took a while, Shelley. You said, it's amazing. Yeah, but it took a while for the rabbis to create a Jewish calendar, which you can already see how complicated and how complex it is. It took a while for them until they perfected the formula so they can have an easier way to plan in advance. In Judaism, it's very important to know how to plan in advance. Tell me about it, right? We like to know when Rosh Hashanah is going to be next year and in 2 years or 3 years from now. Or sometimes we want to plan a bar mitzvah in advance or whatever. So it's important to know what's coming ahead. Back in the day, they couldn't do that. They couldn't do that. They were living day by day. And they needed witnesses to tell them when the new month will start. So it was a different kind of living, different lifestyle. Terry, I couldn't understand why Yom Kippur was falling on Wednesday. I said, okay, thank you. This is why. It's way more complex than Yom Kippur, and nothing wrong with Yom Kippur. The whole calendar has to be synchronized in certain way. So let's move on into the month. Okay, as I mentioned, we have 12 regular months, and they are Nisan. And I mentioned Nisan first because according to the Torah, that is the first month of the year. Remember, the biblical calendar says that we start on Nisan. The rabbinic calendar says we start on Tishrei. So we have Nisan, it's always 30 days. Then we have Iyar, it's always 29 days. We have Sivan, always 30 days. Tammuz, always 29 days. Av, 30 days. Elul, 29 days. Tishrei, 30 days. Cheshvan, sometimes it's 29, sometimes it's 30. Kislev, sometimes it's 29, sometimes it's 30. Tevet, always 29. Shvat, always 30 days. Adar, always 29 days. In the leap year, an additional month, Adar 1, which always have 30 days, is added after Shvat, and the regular Adar is referred to as Adar 2. Even for that, the rabbi had to complicate it. When we have 2 months of Adar, the added one is the first one, and the real one is the second one. How do we know that? Because what is the festival, the most famous festival of Adar? Purim. And Purim is always celebrated on Adar 2. So that tells you the clue that the first Adar is the one that is added because it's a leap year. Okay? Very important to understand that. Okay, So let's continue with this. So again, the Bible designates Nisan as the first month of the year, but the modern practice followed the scheme described in the Talmud. Nisan is a new year for the reigns of kings and the festivals. Rosh Hashanah, which means the head of the year, and is celebrated in the month of Tishrei, is the new year for the counting of years. This is when the numbered year changes, which is most significant for determining the Shemitah, or the sabbatical year, and the Yovel, the Jubilee year, and that's why eventually we discontinued the biblical calendar and we use exclusively, for halachic purposes, the rabbinic calendar, that is the one that starts on Tishrei. So those are the months of the Jewish day. So remember I talked before about Rosh Chodesh? Well, Rosh Chodesh is always celebrated on the first day of the month, but if the previous month had 30 days, Rosh Chodesh is observed on the 30th day of the month and on the first day of the following month. That's a kind of a catch. If there is a yahrzeit on the 30th day, yeah, of course, yes, on the 29th, yes. So let's talk a little bit about the day. So, the Jewish day is of no fixed length. The Jewish day is modeled on the reference to that it was evening and that it was morning in the creation account in the first chapter of Genesis. Accordingly, it runs from sunset, start of the evening, to the next sunset. So, in other words, for halachic purposes, when we talk about the day, it's usually the time of light. Whenever there is light, that is the length of the practical day, because there was no way to count time during the night. In the Talmud, they are I remember reading it once, very interesting ways that they calculated cycles of time at night, and they was basically based on noise. Because they knew that animals, for example, will make noise up to certain time in the middle of the night, and there was a time at night when most babies will make noise, and they will use that as a way to count time overnight. Very funny and very inaccurate. You can't really expect much of that. Many of these times are dependent on the Sha'ah Zemanit, extremely important concept. Remember that word, Sha'ah Zemanit, the proportional hour, special unit of time that takes into account variation in the length of the day. The hour has special meaning in Jewish law. When we say that a certain mitzvah can be performed 3 hours into the day, it doesn't mean that 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 clock hours after sunrise. Okay, that is confusing, but let's keep reading and you will understand why. The Sha'ah Zmanit is defined by dividing by 12 the interval between the sunrise and sunset. So, in other words, you take all the hours of the day, we take that length of time, and you divide it into 12 equal segments. Each segment is called an hour for the rabbi, also Sha'ah Zemanit. And so the Sha'ah Zemanit, so using this method, for example, if sunrise is at 5 a.m. and sunset is at 7:30 p.m., we have 14.5 clock hours, and that is 870 minutes of light. Then dividing this number by 12 produces the value for the Sha'ah Zmanit for this specific day, which is 72.5 minutes. Okay, so every hour that day will be 72.5 minutes long. It's that's why I was joking. That it may be the concept of Jewish time with people, they said, the time is relative, so you're never really late. You always say, it's Jewish time, may come from these days. Who knows? For the rabbis, time is relative. It depends what time of the year it is. In the middle of the summer, hours are very long. In the middle of the winter, hours are very short, are shorter than 60 minutes, because we have fewer hours of light. So it's calculated differently. So for example, let me open here, let me open my calendar, and you will, where do I have my calendar? I have my computer calendar, and I will open it so you can see it here. So this is a calendar for today. So if I want to have, let's see, this will tell me Sha'ah Zmanit for today is 58 minutes and 2 seconds. And you cannot see it, but it's basically, it says here at the bottom. I know it's probably too small for you to see, but it will tell me this calendar, the Sha'ah Zmanit for every day of the year. Pretty awesome. Okay, let's continue with this. And I have one more thing to share with you, which is the Jewish week. And the Hebrew calendar follows a 7 days weekly cycle. No difference with that, with the civil calendar, which runs concurrently but independently of the civil calendar. The names for the days of the week are simply the day number within the week. So basically, Sunday is called Yom Rishon, which means first day. And remember, the Jewish day always starts the previous night, what we call the Erev. So that's why I said, for example, Erev Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah starts at night and ends at night, the same way that the day starts at night and ends at night. So if I say that during the day we have 3 different services, that we have the Shacharit, that is in the morning, Mincha is afternoon, and Arvit, the evening, the first service of the day is not Shacharit, is Ma'ariv. The first service of the day is the evening service. Confusing? And this is because we live in 2 different kind of worlds. You have the Jewish world and the civil world. And they work in a different way. They operate differently. So Yom Rishon is the Sunday, then you have Yom Sheni, second day Monday, Yom Shlishi, third day Tuesday, Yom Revi'i, the 4th day Wednesday, Yom Hamishi, the 5th day Thursday, Yom Shishi, the 6th day Friday, Yom Shabbat is the Sabbath day of rest, that's Saturday. The names of the week, the names of the days of the weeks are modeled on the 7 day mentioned in the creation story. So we use the same names that God used for the days. And it's interesting because he said, shouldn't we? Why? Of course, we should use the same names that God used for the days. Well, yes, but we don't do the same with the month. Because God also called every month with a number, but we don't use that for our month. We adopted the rabbinic way of counting month, which is putting them names that they were created in Babylonia. Probably we are using names that they were borrowed by the rabbis when they were living in Babylonia, so they adopted the way the Babylonians used to call their months. And this is all what I have here to present. So I would like to answer any questions that you might have. I'm going back to the Sukkah. And remember also, if you haven't yet, to subscribe to our channel so you can receive all the updates every time we upload new material to the internet or every time we go live. So you have to remember, even if you subscribe, to hit the bell so you will be notified every time we go live. Interesting, the English calendar uses Sunday at the beginning of the week. Yeah, that's the way it should be. Although I've seen some calendars that they start on Saturday, the week, but it should start on Sunday. Because remember that Shabbat should be always at the end. God worked first, and then God rested. So it doesn't make sense to move Shabbat at the beginning. So you can't start resting and then you work, which it did kind of happen with the civil calendar when the day of rest became Sunday and you start the week resting and then you work. Somehow it got twisted in the process. Alain, by any chance we don't give specific name for the years? Well, that's not necessarily correct. We do. Because every year in Hebrew is written with Hebrew letters, and sometimes to refer to the year, we kind of put vowels to it, so it sounds like a word. which doesn't make any. I mean, that doesn't. The word doesn't exist, but we put vowels to say the name. So this year will be Taf Shin Pei Aleph. So you can call it, I don't know, Tashpa or something like that. For example, I'm not sure the way it's called this year, but sometimes it's they use something like that to refer to the year, so it sounds like it does have a name when you read it in Hebrew. Shelley says, that's easier than reading Roman numerals. That's, yeah, that reminds me to the joke of the Roman soldier who enters to a bar and looks at the server and he says, I want 5 beers. I hope you got that one. 5 beers. Roman numerals. The V. Yeah. Sorry, I had to throw a joke. You know me by now. Okay. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Remember to subscribe. We have our activities coming up. So check our website. Great pleasure to be with you. Stay safe. All the best. Hope to see you soon. Chag Sameach in advance. Bye now.